Imagine a future where rising seas and extreme weather not only threaten our homes, but also drain our national economy. As climate change continues to impact the Bahamas, the financial costs are growing, from disaster recovery to sustainable infrastructure investments. This is Protecting Paradise, the Bahamas' fight against climate change. Join us as we explore the real price of climate change and the innovative solutions that could help protect our islands and our economy for generations to come. Keep watching. A brand new episode of You and Your Money starts now.
You and Your Money is brought to you by J.S. Johnson, Leno, and Easy Car Sales.
Welcome to You and Your Money, everyone. Joining us today to talk about rising tides, the impact of sea level rise on the Bahamas, is Dr. Rhianna Neely-Murphy from the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection. Dr. Rhianna Neely-Murphy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Dr. Rhianna, how has the rising sea levels already affected coastal communities in the Bahamas, and what are the projections for the coming decades?
So thank you. And again, it's a pleasure to be here. I would just like to say that the entire Bahamas is a coastal community. We have been designated, the entire 100,000 square miles of us, as coastal. So all 400,000 of us, based on the last census, are included in the coastal communities. And so this is having an impact on everybody in the Bahamas, from north to south, east to west. And we're seeing impacts with respect to the last 30 years, the last 10 years, the last 20 years on our coastlines, where if you walk along certain beaches, you would see that if there is a place that you used to be able to walk and it's dry, we've seen about 1 foot of sea level rise that we have experienced in the last 30 years. And we expect that if there is a business as usual, if nobody does anything to address the climate crisis, the climate change issue, that we could see up to 1 meter of sea level rise across the Bahamas.
Now, I know you said it affects the entire Bahamas. Now, what specific areas or islands in the Bahamas are most vulnerable to sea level rise, and what measures are being taken in order to protect these areas?
So we've seen some impacts in central and northern Bahamas. We've also seen some more different impacts in the southern Bahamas. But sea level rise impacts everybody. Once the tides come in, at high tide, the tides would be higher, so that means the water level would come up higher than what we're used to. And those will have impacts because our lands are based, the measurement of our lands are based on where the high tides are for those of us that are living along those coastal areas. It also has some impacts on how we manage our infrastructure. Many of our roads across the Family Islands are coastal roads. And so as sea level continues to rise, there are consequences for the maintenance of those roads, the maintenance of the seawalls, the maintenance of any groins that would be there for protection, to protect the infrastructure that is behind. And though all of those have financial, economic, social consequences on Bahamians.
Wow. Can you explain the science behind sea level rise and how climate change actually contributes to this phenomenon?
Sure. So there are a couple things going on with sea level rise, and I like to use the warm water analogy because most of us are familiar with warm water. So if you set some cool water in a tea kettle, what water does when it begins to heat is it starts to expand, and when that water starts to get warmer and warmer and warmer, it will continue to expand in the tea kettle. This will result in some bubbling going on, and then a whistling tea kettle if we have one of those old tea kettles. But in the ocean, the waters continue to expand, and that results in the sea level rise, in what we call sea level rise. There is another thing happening where you have ice that is over land. A lot of people say, well, there's ice melting in the Arctic and that's impacting the sea level rise. That ice is already in the water. And so as that ice melts, the water that is already displaced any kind of water that was in the ocean. But the ice that is over land is what we need to be concerned about, the ice in the Antarctic. Once that begins to melt, this ice was never accounted for in our oceans. And so once that begins to melt, we now will have an addition of water being added to the ocean, and that will also increase our sea levels.
Well, definitely there wasn't a consideration between the ice over land versus the ice on water, and having to account for it. Now, what role do coastal restoration projects like mangrove replanting and coral reef protection play in mitigating the impact of the rising tides?
So they have an immense impact. Mangroves, coral reefs, a part of the ecosystem function is to help us protect what is immediately behind them. And so coral reefs help to reduce the impact of storm surges. So as that wave comes crashing in, the coral reefs will begin to take the beating first. Of course, this has an impact on the corals, but it would reduce the impact that we experience. Wetlands and mangroves have the same impact. They tend to slow the waves down as they come onshore. And so it's very important to continue with these initiatives. As climate change becomes more and more of a problem, our coastal wetlands and our coral reefs are being impacted by not only sea level rise, but also increased temperatures. And so we've seen corals that are under stress, and a coral that is under distress will not be able to perform its ecosystem function in the way that it should. And so we are paying special attention to these ecosystems to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that they are there for us when we need them.
We definitely, for those of us that don't pay close attention to the little details in terms of the coral reef and the impact that it plays, we definitely need to make sure we pay closer attention going forward. Now, how can local communities and businesses adapt to the changes brought by the rising sea levels, and what resources are available to help them?
I remember a story that my grandfather told me about a storm that hit Athens in the 1920s. And it decimated many of the communities that were along the coastlines. And so what they learned at that point in time was that maybe we shouldn't build so close to the coastline, and we need to move inland, move up onto the hills. So these are lessons that we have learned from our grandparents. These lessons have translated into policies that you need to have adequate coastal setbacks for not only housing, but for roads, and for any walls that you would put there, because there needs to be a separation between our coastline and where we have hard infrastructure to allow them to do the jobs that nature intended for them to do. Now, as a government agency, the Bahamas receives quite a bit of UN funding through our department to do this very same work. And so we are collecting data, and we're also implementing projects in coastal communities to shore up, to put in hard infrastructure like seawalls to make sure that the communities behind these coastlines are protected. We're also investing a significant amount of money in coral reef restoration. Our coral reefs are under great stress, like I said, not only from sea level rise, but from disease as well as increased ocean temperatures. And so we're investing in our coral reefs to make sure that they are able to be resilient as our changes continue to impact them, and mostly in a negative way.
Well, Dr. Rhianna Neely-Murphy, we have to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to look at the cost of climate change, financial impacts, and sustainable solutions for the Bahamas. This is You and Your Money. We'll be right back.
I love my EV. I am Generation E.
I am Generation E.
I am Generation E.
And I am Generation E.
Throughout our lifetime, we must all make decisions. No matter how we choose, the right one just needs to be made. Like having J.S. Johnson Insurance Agents and Brokers as your insurance partner. We've been serving the Bahamas for over 100 years. Whether you need home, motor, marine, or commercial insurance, make the right decision. Call 397-2100 or visit jsjohnson.com.
J.S. Johnson Insurance, peace of mind.
Wake up, wake up, wake up, Dad, early with Bahamas at Sunrise on RTV, channel 212. We're live at 6:30 a.m. on Mondays and Fridays with rebroadcast at 8 a.m. on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and also at 9 a.m. on Saturdays. Man, Bahamas at Sunrise brings you everything. We got weather, fashion, food, politics, current events, music, and more with your hosts, Mark Daniels and Gabrielle Gardner. Tune in to Bahamas at Sunrise, dead early, the best in Bahamian morning television.
Man, I thought retirement would have slowed you down.
It's the island life, son. Living in paradise.
Must be nice. Can't wait until it's my turn, if that day ever comes.
My financial planner has provided me with solutions for my future. Pension, retirement, and even property management.
So who helped you with all this?
Let's go, son. 2 more miles.
What's Leno?
Welcome back to You and Your Money, everyone. In this segment, we are continuing our conversation with Dr. Rhianna Neely-Murphy from the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection. We'll be discussing the cost of climate change, financial impacts, and sustainable solutions for the Bahamas. Now, Dr. Rhianna, how has climate change financially impacted the Bahamas so far, particularly in terms of disaster recovery costs, as well as the infrastructure damage from hurricanes and floods?
So for the last few years, we haven't had any major impacts of hurricanes in the Bahamas, and we're very thankful, very grateful for that. But we would have heard that our Prime Minister would have indicated on the international and national stage that most of our debt is as a result of these natural disasters that would have impacted us. We've had Hurricane Irma, we've had Hurricane Matthew, we've had Hurricane Dorian, that these storms, Bahamians will never ever forget. And as a result of many of these storms, we have taken initiatives to increase our resilience and reduce our vulnerability to storms. And these also have financial implications for Bahamians that would want to build a house, for anyone considering the development of a subdivision, the building of a hotel, or any kind of development in these coastal areas. Now we have to think about what the landscape is going to look like in 20, 30, 50 years from now, and plan and work today to implement and to mitigate any of the negative impacts.
What would you say is the estimated economic toll of climate change on the Bahamas over the next decade, and how is the government planning to fund the necessary climate adaptation measures?
So in 2022, the Bahamas submitted its nationally determined contribution to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We are a signatory to this convention. We signed the Paris Agreement. And in the document, from the assessments that we were able to complete, we were able to determine that any climate change adaptation and mitigation actions that have already been identified as of 2022 would cost the Bahamas in excess of $4 billion with a B, dollars. And of course, many of these activities we have not planned. These are different in many instances from our national development plans, from our traditional development plans. And so we need to now take into consideration this additional $4 billion to make sure that we are prepared in the face of climate change and are resilient in the face of these storms.
And how can investing in sustainable solutions such as renewable energy and eco-friendly infrastructure reduce the long-term costs associated with climate change?
So investing in renewable energy, sustainable infrastructure, I want to say right now that the Bahamas, we're talking about climate change, the Bahamas is pretty much net zero on our greenhouse gas emissions. We emit 0.01% to the total global greenhouse gas count. And so many of these activities, all of these activities that we have undertaken are to increase our to decrease our vulnerability, increase our resilience, and decrease the cost of living in the country as these scarce resources become even more scarce. So that when we look at electricity, the cost of electricity, if you implement or install renewable energy or any kind of renewable energy or energy efficient appliance, you are helping the climate system, but in the long run, you are increasing your resiliency in the face of a natural disaster, in the face of climate change. When those fossil fuel markets go up and the price of fuel goes up to over $150 per barrel, we are able to provide power for ourselves, and we're more resilient and more effective when those shocks come.
We definitely need to do what it takes in order for us to be a more resilient country, a more resilient nation in every which way. Are there international, I know you mentioned some aspect of international funding, but what other international funding or grant opportunities that's available to the Bahamas that will help to offset the cost of climate adaptation, as well as how can the local businesses and communities access some of these resources?
So as one of the nation's focal points for climate change, we receive global environment facility funding. The Department of Environmental Planning and Protection is the focal point for the Global Environment Facility, which is the funding arm, or one of the funding arms for the United Nations. And so we receive funding to conduct assessments, to implement projects. So we have several projects that are ongoing now in our marine parks to shore up those systems, again, work on coral reefs, assist with coral reef restoration and rehabilitation, mangrove and forest restoration and rehabilitation. And to assist, another one is to assist the agricultural sector, because we need food. Humans we need food, we need water, and climate change will have an impact on our agricultural sector and our ability to feed ourselves. And so we're looking right now at how we can use these international dollars to assist us and become more resilient as a country.
Now, Dr. Rhianna, what about food security? Is climate change affecting our ability to grow our own food?
Yes. Climate change really is impacting all of our earth systems, and in the Bahamas, climate change is slated to impact our food security. And we understand this, and so we've taken some time and allocated some funding to address this very thing. But let me just tell you how climate change is going to impact our ability. So we have very low fertile soil across much of the Bahamas. And the soil is one of those carbon sinks as well. You know, the ocean is the biggest carbon sink that we have. It covers most of our planet. Soils are right up there next to the oceans with their ability to trap carbon dioxide. And so as our soils continue to trap carbon dioxide, which is a part of their function, they will also become more and more acidic. And so there will be a need for more inputs into the soils that we have in the Bahamas to make them more productive and to keep them fertile for longer periods. Now, like I said, we've seen this and we understand that this is one of our emerging problems. We have received some funding from the GEF, from the Global Environment Facility, for a project called the Integrated Land Management Project, that we're doing now assessments on our soil systems across the Providence and the Family Islands, those islands that grow food for us, and to see what the baseline is for our soils. How acidic is the soil? How fertile is the soil? What would the soil need to be able to produce those onions, those potatoes, and those foods that we have come to rely on and that are healthy and nutritious? So we're doing that now. And the second step of this project is to assist with greenhouse growth for foods that we grow now in the soil. Greenhouses are very effective at growing produce over longer scales. You are able to control the temperatures, you're able to control the water inputs, etc. And so there's going to be assistance and grants for farmers to do these kinds of things. There will also be assistance for farmers to invest in climate resilient food growing tools and equipment. Like I said, greenhouses, but also the fertilizers that you need, any kind of chemicals that you need, or any kind of eco-friendly agribusiness tool that can assist you with building resilience in your farm system and to help us grow more foods. And so the opportunity, you will soon be hearing more about it through the Bahamas Development Bank, the opportunity for farmers to go and get grant funds to be able to assist themselves and to assist us to continue to feed ourselves.
Well, Dr. Rhianna Neely-Murphy, we have to take another break. And when we come back, we'll discuss community resilience, preparing for stronger storms and changing weather patterns. This is You and Your Money. We'll be right back.
Man, I thought retirement would have slowed you down.
It's the island life, son. Living in paradise.
Must be nice. Can't wait until it's my turn, if that day ever comes.
My financial planner has provided me with solutions for my future. Pension, retirement, and even property management.
So who helped you with all this?
Let's go, son. 2 more miles.
What's Leno?
Throughout our lifetime, we must all make decisions. No matter how we choose, the right one just needs to be made. Like having J.S. Johnson Insurance Agents and Brokers as your insurance partner. We've been serving the Bahamas for over 100 years. Whether you need home, motor, marine, or commercial insurance, make the right decision. Call 397-2100 or visit jsjohnson.com.
J.S. Johnson Insurance, peace of mind.
I love my EV. I am Generation E.
I am Generation E.
I am Generation E.
And I am Generation E.
Welcome back to You and Your Money, everyone. Dr. Rhianna Neely-Murphy from the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection is still here with us. In the previous segments, we spoke about the rising tides, the impact of sea level rise on the Bahamas, and the cost of climate change, the financial impacts, and sustainable solutions for the Bahamas. In this segment, I want us to talk about community resilience, preparing for stronger storms and changing weather patterns. Now, Dr. Rhianna, how are communities in the Bahamas preparing for the increased frequency as well as the intensity of hurricanes and other extreme weather events caused by climate change?
I think that the more recent storms have really primed us to sort of expect the unexpected. I know that after Dorian, many people were encouraged to add things like hammers and hatchets to their hurricane plan or their hurricane bag or box, including with your passport and any important documents. But the impact of climate change, hurricanes everywhere, they rely on warm waters. And our waters, the temperatures have been on the rise for the last 10 years. So July is on record again as the hottest July ever in history since we've been recording temperatures. Okay, so this year the Bahamas, our coral reefs would have experienced some bleaching. Last year the same would have happened, and then they're trying to revamp and they're trying to recover. This has impacts on our coastal communities, especially in the Family Islands, where you have many people who are still subsistence fishermen. We have commercial fishermen in these Family Islands who depend on the survivability and the thriving of our coral reef ecosystems. So this has a direct financial impact on their ability to provide for their families and to continue to thrive and live the Bahamian life. Now, when we have storms coming, it is important for everyone to pay attention to the advisories as they're coming. But I would like to highlight here that with the last few storms that we have had, although they have not been as catastrophic as once before, these storms intensified very quickly. And so I want to encourage every Bahamian, once we understand that there is a storm that is in our area and that is on the potential path to hit the Bahamas, that we begin to actively prepare for a storm, because we've seen with at least these last two storms that they strengthened within 12 to 24 hours. And that does not give us a lot of time to be able to go to the food store or get gas and secure our homes. So we have to be in a state of readiness, especially during the hurricane season.
You know, just having the thought of the state of readiness, some people may want to go ahead and think, well, you know, we want to just put people in a panic mode, but it's not really panic, it's really being ready.
Yes.
Now, what initiatives or projects are underway to strengthen infrastructure and protect the coastal areas from storm damage and flooding?
So there is a countrywide integrated coastal zone management program that's going on that is designed to reinforce our seawalls. Of course, you cannot have a country that is surrounded by walls. And so in those areas where we are unable to put in hard infrastructure, gray infrastructure, like a wall, we are working with our ecosystem, the wetlands, the corals, the forests, to make sure that there is that balance and that there is that breezeway for our coastlines to breathe, for the waters to come in and for the waters to recede, that will not have a negative impact on people's homes, on the roads, on the light poles, on any kind of infrastructure that we rely upon.
Now, how does, or how important is disaster preparedness? We kind of touched on it just a little bit earlier, but how important is it as well as the education in terms of building resilience, and what steps are being taken to ensure that communities are ready for future storms?
So there are several departments across government and NGOs that are investing in education in these communities. Education is very important to make sure that people understand, one, what the problem is, two, how you can impact the problem and how the problem is going to impact you. And so we need to understand all of these things so that when we hear climate change or when we hear that there is a storm approaching, that we know, one, I need to do this, two, I need to do that, and then three, we can do this and we're prepared. Whether your plan is to stay at home or find a shelter, you need to prepare your checklist and make sure that those things are happening. We rely very heavily in the Family Islands, especially on our Family Island administrator partners, to get information out to vulnerable communities or in communities that will be potentially impacted by storms. And so the working relationship with our department and other government agencies is very crucial, and we take it as a privilege, as a matter of fact, to work with these Bahamians to make sure that all of Bahamians stay safe.
Now, you talked about the educational component, but is there a particular place where persons can get access to this information? Is it available online or even on the Family Islands? Where can persons get access to information about climate change, and what are some practical things that they can actually do to prepare themselves?
So right now, the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection is developing a tool of question and answers, frequently asked questions about climate change, to make sure that everyone, no matter your education level, no matter your work level, that you are able to understand what climate change is and its projected impacts on the Bahamas. That's the first thing. We have several tools in the K-12 system. Climate change has been incorporated into the science curriculum for the BGCSE. Okay. And so students coming out of high school will get a better understanding. They will leave high school with a better understanding of what climate change is and how it's impacting them and the things that they can do to address climate change. We also have a book that was written by the National Climate Change Committee, some members of that committee, myself included. It was a book for grade 5 through 8 students, okay, on the impacts of climate change, pretty much on our food systems and our coastlines. And so that book is also available through the Ministry of Education for anyone that would want, and we have copies at our office as well.
All right, where's your office located?
We are located Charlotte House, ground floor, Charlotte House, that's on the corner of Shirley Street and Charlotte Street, right in beautiful Nassau, Bahamas.
All right, well, Dr. Rhianna Neely-Murphy, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
As we face the realities of climate change, it's clear that protecting the Bahamas isn't just an environmental responsibility, it's an economic imperative. By investing in sustainable solutions today, we can build a resilient future that safeguards both our communities and our economy. Let's work together to ensure that our islands remain strong, sustainable, and prosperous for generations to come. That's it for today's show, and don't forget to follow You and Your Money on Facebook and tune in next week for a brand new episode. I'm Ria Christina. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.